Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. We will be trying something else today. Something different. Something that literally nobody else does, because like I have mentioned in the past, the war will no longer be sanitized on this show. Also, I figure that I should be making episodes that you actually would want to share with people for whom this episode will be the very first one that they listen to, so that you don't have to listen to all the stuff made previously about this war. Also, I'm angry at this point, since if you've checked my previous shows this month, then you'll know how, in extremely professional language that doesn't hit you emotionally, many lies can be hidden. But in general, I really hope that you will be sharing this episode with someone who has never heard about this whole situation and maybe changed their minds. I intend to hit them on a bit of a different level than we do normally. So, comrades, plug in, turn up the volume if necessary, because truth does not knock politely anymore on the Eastern Border. This is Kristaps Andrejsons, your loyal tour guide through the septic tank at the end of history. And I'm here to talk about the great and glorious Holy War, the crusade to restore a phantom empire, to purify the motherland, to put the world back in its proper order. You have seen the propaganda, I know you have, it's unavoidable. It's a glittering, high-definition lie piped into every screen. You've seen the slick videos of unstoppable tanks rolling under triumphant banners. You have seen the Z logo, that jagged little scar slapped on everything from buses to lapel pins. You have listened to the stern-jawed pronouncements from President for Life Putin, his voice a low thrum of counterfeit gravitas, talking about spiritual purity and the sacred struggle against a decadent, godless West. It's a beautiful story in a way, a wicked one, a story of heroes and villains of a righteous nation rising from its knees to reclaim its destiny. It's also a complete and utter load of weaponized, soul-crushing, evil horse shit. I, as usual, have gotten my hands on the raw data, the unfiltered dispatches from the engine room of the fascist war machine. And let me tell you, the reality is not a glorious epic. It's a grim, postulant, profoundly stupid tragedy written in spreadsheets, tainted blood, and extremely bad writing. I'm going to show you what this crusade is really made of. The truth is a dirty business and, well, tonight we're going to have a swim in this cesspool. Let's talk about criminalization of thought first. Not even thought, the memory of a thought. An impulse. A click. We have reached a point where the most dangerous thing you can be is on a spreadsheet somewhere. And, well, before we turn our attention to Russia, if you think that this is just some weird, isolated Russian psychosis, you're not paying attention. The disease, sadly, is spreading. The playbook is open source, you see. Look at what just happened in Turkey. Some youth activist, Enes Hokalgulari, has the sheer, beautiful audacity to stand up at the Council of Europe, a sad little club in France for upholding human rights, and criticize the great Sultan, President Erdogan. He exercises his right to free speech in a place theoretically designed to protect it. So it happens. The moment his plane touches down back in Ankara, they cuff him. Tuesday night, welcome home, you've got an opinion and we've got to sell for it. This isn't a one-off, it's just the latest click on the board. His arrest comes amid a crackdown that's seen more than 500 of Erdogan's opponents detained in 9 months. And the Council of Europe? Oh, they're on it. The Congress of Local Authorities called for his immediate release. Their president, a guy named Mark Cools, said he has deep concern about the state of democracy in Turkey. He called the arrest scandalous and unacceptable. Ha ha! Scandalous, unacceptable! I'll show you scandalous and unacceptable. A strongly worded letter versus a prison door. I wonder who wins that fight. They're expressing deep concern while the gears of an oppressive state grind another voice into silence. See, it's the same playbook. A different flavor of authoritarian bullshit, but the same fundamental principle. In Turkey, they grab you at the airport for what you said. In Russia, the machine is more patient. It's more insidious. It doesn't need to wait for you to speak. It just checks your bank records from 4 years ago. 4 years ago, you see, a court in Moscow decided that Alexei Navalny's anti-corruption foundation, the FBK, Fond Borby s Koruptsiei, was an extremist organization. A flick of a pen, a stamp on a file, and suddenly, an entire movement was reclassified as a threat to the state. Simple, clean, bureaucratic, as the clerks love it, really. At first, nothing really happened to the people who'd tossed a few rubles their way, but the machine was busy with bigger targets. But the machine never forgets. It logs, it waits. Despite its incompetency, it sometimes has to do a thing or two, and they had almost run out of liberals to throw in jail cells. And by the middle of this crazy, cursed year of 2025, the hunt, well, became routine, really. We're talking about a nationwide, federally mandated campaign to crush anyone who ever clicked the donate button. We know of at least 76 criminal cases in 38 regions, from the shores of the Baltic to the frozen-ass sand of Siberia. This isn't really a crackdown, to be honest, it's an audit. A soul audit. And there's a part that Navalny's team also have to report for it and take some responsibility. But let me paint you a picture first. You're a programmer, some guy named Alexander Basov, you're living your life. One day the doorbell rings, it's the FSB, but these aren't jackbooted thugs, they're just incompetent. Basov said he managed to get his phones and laptops out of the house before they even started the search. They take him for questioning and lay it all out. Well, this is a federal program, they tell him. We've been given the task of rounding up everyone who has sponsored the Fond Berbis Korupcije. They have a plan, they have a quota, your name on the list, another box to be ticked off. Basov went home, checked his bank records, and sure enough, he had donated something back in 2021, apparently slightly after the court had already dropped the extremist label on the Navalny's team. He didn't even remember doing it, but the bank remembered. The system remembered. Instead of going back to give a proper confession, the guy did the only sane thing you can do when the machine calls your number. He got the hell out of the country. He was lucky. He's pretty sure they never even formally opened a case against him. Others were not so lucky. So how does this work? How does the whole seeing, all-knowing algorithm find you? Well, you see, Moscow is truly a surveillance state. But this all started with a fuck-up. On August the 5th, 2021, the day after the ban became official, Navalny's team relaunched their fundraising through Stripe, an American payment service. They thought it was safe. They thought the data would be hidden. Heck, they even managed to tell every one of their supporters on YouTube that this would be perfectly fine and perfectly safe. Yeah, in direct words, they claimed that this would be all okay. They said the data would be hidden. But on one glorious catastrophic day, the payment description on Russian bank statements included a little Q, a truncated website address, world.fbk.in. That was the thread. The security goons pulled on it, and the first cases against people like journalist Andrei Zayakin were built on that simple plaintext mistake. But what about everyone else? What about the payments made after the FBK fixed the error? That's where the real filth comes in, the deep-down digital grime. The security services, probably some bored lieutenant colonel named Shamayev, had a brilliant, terrible idea whilst staring at bank records. He noticed that all the payments, regardless of their description, had one little thing in common. Unique, unchangeable string of characters, a digital fingerprint. It's called a merchant ID, and the merchant ID they latched onto is V2NI29SJROMGYKY. Now, repeat after me. Okay, just really don't. But this number thing, yeah, the barcode on your soul, the serial number of your descent. That's the name that the machine will now call you when it decides you're a problem, and they can do it because of their own Gosislogi, the Central State Services website. This isn't even about ideology anymore. This is about pattern recognition. The investigation goes backwards. They don't find a suspect and then look for a crime. They find a transaction tied to this satanic string of characters, and from that they get a name. By the time they knock on your door, they already have everything they need. And this time they actually have something, because previously they just invented things, and those are harder to prove at court. Let me remind you that modern-day Putin's Russia has a larger conviction rate than Soviet Union had in Stalin's day. They, back this up with testimony from banking experts, testimony that's copied and pasted word for word from one case file to the next across the entire country. Nice little template of putting people into jail. The FBK, Navalny's team, can claim it's not their ID, that Stripe assured them that everything was anonymous, but it doesn't matter. Every single person prosecuted has been linked to payments made to that one unique identifier. And they build their case for your intent with the digital breadcrumbs of your life. Did you register on the smart voting website? Well, that's evidence. Did you have conversations about politics with your friends? Evidence again. They argue that if you were interested in politics, you could not have been unaware that Navalny's team was banned and extremist. Yeah, Don't be curious. Your own curiosity becomes the noose that they will hang you with. The apathy really is needed. The cruelty, however, has a method to it. It is as varied as the geography. In the regions, you might just get a crippling fine of a few 100,000 rubles. But in Moscow, the machine demands its pound of flesh. In Moscow, they almost always get real prison terms. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. For what? For a donation made from a Russian card years ago. And if you think a foreign bank account will save you, ask Alexei Manyarevsky. He sent $150 from a European Revolut account. But he made the mistake of returning to Russia. To be frank, the same one Navalny made. So they arrested him, beat him, and forced him to give up the passwords to his devices. They found the Revolut app and the email receipts, and that was that. There was no escape anymore. The only safe space is the one they haven't thought to look at yet. That's the new, nice, and kind face of tyranny. It's a line of code, it's in a cell of a spreadsheet, and it's just that horrible. It's an algorithm designed to comb through the past and criminalize memory itself, and it's working perfectly. And at the same time, I feel so much shocked that this came out on Mediazone, a really reliable source of information and a research center. Highly respectable. They are ones of the really good sources, the ones that we know are reliable and great. And the Navalny's team did nothing. Nothing about this. They did not speak about this. They did not mention this on their YouTube channel. None of them. This is inhuman, don't you think? Because again, these very people stated that it's totally safe for you to donate to them. They, at least, should provide some help to the people who have been now arrested and serving prison sentences because of their own actions. Sure, they should have left Russia, but just outright ignoring this? Not even mentioning this at all? Yeah, that's sort of what you shouldn't be doing. Doesn't seem to be the face of an honest political center and network. Well, the one politician out of all of that mess that I still respect is Vladimir Milov, but that's because he's barely interacting with them anymore. Otherwise, I've seen their debates about similar issues, about whether or not people will get arrested, and they're just worried about how they will look to the West, because apparently a lot of people in the West think that they are some sort of panacea of democracy and that they will return to Russia and establish some new glorious democratic power. But since Navalny's death, well, they have fired a bunch of people, they have been busy arguing with other people in Russian opposition, and, they have been pretending to play nice with the European bureaucrats. Because, well, what else can they do? They now exploit Navalny's brand and just try to, gain some PR points out of all of this situation. Compare and contrast that to Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and the Belarus opposition. These guys are working hard, and I know that. But Navalny's team should not be really trusted with dealing with this mess, since, yet again, they and some other Russian oppositionaries, they're just throwing filth at each other. The best thing that they can do. Seriously, this reminds me of revolutionaries from France who escaped to Britain in 1789. It is just so silly. But still, they are not the main villains here after all. They're just a bit scummy and egoistical. But the Russian state, you see, it builds a digital panopticon to enforce ideological purity, but surely it should treat its heroic soldiers, the valiant crusaders of this fascist invasion of Ukraine, with at least some honor and respect. They, after all, are supposed to be instruments of its, a muscle behind this new glorious Third Rome Empire, right? Once again, I have to laugh here. Let's talk about blood instead. The actual blood, the vital fluids, not the ones that get added to the water. What was this, fluoride? Yeah, I really love Dr. Strangelove. Well, we here have a text from a Z-blogger, a patriot, named Anastasia Kashvarova, and she's screaming fire about an epidemic of hepatitis C and HIV ravaging through the Russian army. Where did it come from? Well, here's the genius of the system. At the start of the war, the glorious Russian army took heavy losses, and they still do so now. And they needed bodies, warm bodies, any bodies. And where do you get a steady supply of disposable men with minimal paperwork? Of course, the prisons. So they flung open the doors of their penal colonies and started recruiting convicts. And they weren't picky. They took men already riddled with hepatitis and HIV. The Wagner Group, well, Those old dead buddies of mine who are now interconnected intimately with my own private life, this gang of mercs run by this hot dog magnate turned warlord, at least had their own twisted Soviet prison kind of logic to put these men in a separate unit called Umbrella, a leper colony with rifles. Cynical, but, at least organized. The regular army, the official army of this great Russian empire. Nope, none of that nonsense. They just threw everyone into the same pot. What followed was predictable. The front line is a cesspool. When there's death, there are rats, mice, and lice. And add in the battlefield wounds, shared operating tables, emergency blood transfusions, when you can actually get them, and local drug dealers getting the troops hooked on junk, and you have a perfect incubator for plague. A plague that the state itself imported into its own ranks. But, this is where the incompetence blossoms into a full-blown systemic betrayal. There is no prevention. There is no treatment. A soldier gets wounded, he's on the same operating table as an infected comrade, and the bureaucracy. Oh, the beautiful homicidal bureaucracy. When the soldier tests positive for hepatitis C, they don't treat them. They don't discharge them. No, they put him on a dispensary register, which is usually just a note on a piece of paper, if that. And then they tell him they'll retest him in 6 months. In the meantime, he keeps fighting and gets sent to the front lines in these, regular meat assaults. No one treats anyone. Same goes for HIV. It gets better if you're a soldier from Moscow. Well, there is life-saving, albeit expensive, medication from the Special Civilian Center in the capital, but you can't get it. Why? Because as military personnel, you must be treated by the Ministry of Defense. The same Ministry of Defense that doesn't treat you at all. It's a nice little jurisdictional black hole. A perfect, nice, closed loop of lethal neglect by the system. So while Putin is on television, or some other of his cronies, bloviating about traditional values and the spiritual health of his nation, his army is being eaten alive by an epidemic of hepatitis C and HIV. Soldiers, the supposed heroes of this fascist crusade, are sent home on leave carrying an untreated disease back to their families, and much worse things than that. Just as I had finished the script, I found out yet another case when one of these veterans had blown up his own dad and 2 of his friends with a hand grenade. He was supposed to be the criminal authority of his little village, but, now everyone's just exploded. Amazing. The state's problem is about to become everyone's problem, even more so than it is already. Congratulations, citizen! Your hero is home from the Holy War and he's brought you the gift of chronic liver failure. If, not, a grenade. This is the state of holy warriors. Recruited from a prison cell, infected by his own side and abandoned by his own government. If, that is, he returns from the war at all with all the casualty rates. Well, this is the only army where the biohazard and the bioweapons probably affect them more than anything else. Even with this, the invader's body is rotting from the inside out. But what about the tools? What about the invincible arsenal? I still remember the tank Armata existing. The super weapons that Putin shows off in animated videos at his military expos. The weapons that are supposed to make the West tremble. Well, at least you should expect that the Russian army gets some equipment. Let's find out then. Let's check in with the airborne forces. The VDV, the supposed best of the best, the Blue Berets, the pride of the invader. A channel run by, someone on the ground, philologist in ambush. That's how it's called, decided to give a little report from the field on the occasion of Airborne Forces Day. A little reality check. It reads less like a military inventory and more like a desperate Kickstarter campaign, which is on his third legs because the first 2 campaigns failed. He gives us a point-by-point breakdown of the material support for a typical company in these elite troops. Get ready for a masterclass in systemic failure and corruption. Yeah, and, he also messes up some points because that's just how it operates. Point 1, vehicles. Let's talk about the big stuff. The company has 2 UAZ Bukhanka vans, a tin can on wheels designed in the 1950s, and 1 UAZ Patriot. Where did they come from? A grateful Ministry of Defense? Of course not. The company personnel brought them with their own money, or they were donated by humanitarian aid workers. By the way, who now get put into prison because they're all Gherkin's buddies and they are also saying bad things about the Russian army. Since Putin is utterly and devastatingly started to believe his own lies about how the war is going. And, of course, who pays for the spare parts, the petrol, the lubricants, the tires to keep these rust buckets running? Of course, it's the soldiers, out of their own pockets. The money that they get paid, mostly goes for overpriced spare parts. Point 2, smaller vehicles. What about the nimble stuff? The quad bikes, the dirt bikes, the mopeds you need to zip around the battlefield that's, let's just say, crawling with drones, and so this is just, well, practically useless? The company has a few. 3 quads, 6 motorcycles, some scooters. And where did they come from? Do you sense a nice little pattern here? Not a single one was provided by the state. 90% of them came from volunteers. The rest were purchased with their own money. And again, all the fuel, all the parts, all the upkeep, of course, it's all on them. And then we have point 4, the reconnaissance drones. Yes, I know there was no point 3, but that's just how it was in the text. Now, but this part, this is where the magic really happens. The eyes in the sky, the Mavic drones that are essential for Ukrainian war. State contribution? 0. Nothing. Not a single one. But, and you have to appreciate the sheer glorious hypocrisy of this, the local bosses from the Ministry of Defense are constantly demanding that the drones be flown. They demand timely reconnaissance, and if a drone gets shut down, a drone the soldiers or volunteers paid for, they demand to know when it will be replaced. Yeah, well, this is beyond surrealism. It's a complete contradiction of their own military charter, which says provision comes first and only then you do site tasks. Here, the rule is, go buy your own eyes, then use them for us, or else. We can give you HIV after all.
Hey everyone, Annette here. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Eastern Border. This show is possible thanks to your support. So if you like what you hear, head over to patreon.com/The Eastern Border and help us keep it going. Even small contributions make a difference. And don't forget, there's also a Discord. If you want to join the community, chat with Kristaps, share memes, or just learn more about history, come hang out. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thanks again, and now, back to the episode.
And point 4, again, because the incompetence is layered. Personal gear. Let's talk about what keeps them alive. Body armor, uniforms, boots, helmets. The stuff the state does issue is described as, quote, junk and rubbish that cannot withstand any criticism and is destroyed at the training ground stage, end quote. Some things are not issued at all. So every single soldier is a walking monument to do-it-yourself warfare. 2 or 3 sets of summer and winter uniforms. His own body armor, his own helmet, his own weapon training, his own boots. All bought and paid for by himself, his family, his wife, or whoever else was nearby. Point 5, communications. And how do they talk to each other? Well, the Ministry of Defense provides some radios called Azart. The name literally translates to excitement or gambling. How fitting. For anything that actually works, professional lira, tit, or any tone radios, repeaters, and tennis cables, yes, you guessed it right. Because their own money are donations from sponsors. They even have to pay for their own Starlink subscriptions out of all things. And yeah, let me remind you that these donations, they're lessening in number because, yet again, Putin is putting these people into prisons. And then we get to my favorite point, point 6, the FPV drones, the little kamikaze killers. The state issues some, but in catastrophically small quantities and of low quality, and that's a quote. So what do? They take the state-issued crap and finish building it themselves in their own makeshift laboratories at their own expense yet again. And, well, one of these guys said that he spent 7 million rubles on this mess. 7 million rubles he wanted to save for an apartment. 7 million rubles, by the way, is about 76,000 euros or $88,500. Just crazy. And then we of course get to point 8, electronic warfare. The gear that's supposed to protect the Russians from Ukrainian drones. Yeah, the equipment that was issued is either obsolete or broken. So for every vehicle, every position, all the drone detectors and jammers come from their own pockets or from an online fundraising drives, which yet again get blocked and controlled. And then we get to the food parts. Finally, the fuel for these holy warriors themselves. What does the motherland provide to feed its sons on the front lines of its fascist crusade? Well, canned meat of dubious origin, sprouted frozen potatoes, shit cheese as they call it, and palm oil. A few token carrots and beets, maybe. Juice that is described as real nitrates. Cookies that are disgusting crap made from recycled materials, and the meat? Beef tendons, apparently. The author here, philologist in ambush, knows that a normal male body will quickly waste away on this diet. So what do? Everything that they need and want, they have to buy with their own money. No surprises there. Their own food, their own vitamin supplements. If they can afford some, and by vitamin supplements I presume, well, the drugs to last through this whole night. Oh yeah, and water is also a problem. The Ministry of Defense provides dry rations which are, and I quote, good for starving off starvation. Not for living, not for fighting, just for not quite dying. And the punchline to this whole joke? The author wraps it up beautifully. The war is in its 4th year, and on every Russian state-run TV channel, they are talking about an imminent major conflict with NATO. They are preparing the public for World War III while their elite troops, and these yet again are elite troops, the VDV, the airborne guys, while their elite troops are running a Kickstarter campaign to buy boots, food, and medicine. Now think about how the mobilized are doing, or the guys who are conscripted from prison. This guy says it best. Philologist in Ambush writes, over the past 3 years, everyone has become accustomed to the fact that the final outcome of the fighting depends entirely on us and on the people who care enough to help us. The state provides the war, the soldiers have to provide everything else. And that works for our side. But we have to remember that these guys, because of their propaganda, still fight through because of all of this, because of all the nullifications and meat assaults. That is just something that I cannot understand. Another nice little post in Telegram, a cry from the heart from a Russian combat officer, an artilleryman, got published on a Telegram channel called Two Majors, and it's a goddamn masterpiece of gallows humor. This officer, who's been fighting for nearly 3 years, says his crew are true pros. They apparently really know their business. When the war started, he says, they were using old, crusty, rust-fleckled Soviet-era ammunition. And you know what? It worked. Then they got shipments from Iran. He says they were perfect sets of shots. Then came the North Korean stuff. Not great, he says. More like carpet bombing of areas. You couldn't use it for precision work, but you at least could get rid of it. And then the moment of glory arrived. They started delivering the new, modern, homegrown Russian ammunition. This guy's professional assessment? Quote, to say that it's shit is an understatement, end quote. It isn't just a complaint, this is a work of art. He says you fire one shot from a batch, you make your adjustments for the next one, and the second shell, from the exact same batch, lands 1 to 2 kilometers off target. There are no checklists, no quality control, nothing. He says sometimes the powder charges show up without their caps. Imagine that, you're in a trench staring down death and the gear your country has given you to try and conquer Ukraine is actively trying to get you killed. It's one huge cosmic joke with a body count. But this is where it transcends mere incompetence and enters the realm of pure systemic malice. What happens when these soldiers, these men who have been fighting for fucked up ideals, for pure fascism for all these years, somehow even believing this greater Russia, trying to destroy Ukrainian equipment, doing their, well, horrific fascist jobs to the best, what happens when they tell commanders that their shells are useless, which is why meat assaults have to happen, because then they, can't have artillery support? Well, the commanders, of course, call them cowards. They tell them to stop making excuses. And the punishment? Well, there's only one kind of punishment. Well, they get transferred to the assault units. Glorious, glorious meat assault units. To die on the battlefield, straight up. They're taken from their guns, given a rifle, and sent to storm trenches with no retraining. In the same way how they've actually sent a bunch of their strategic missile forces. I'm talking nuclear missiles here. About 35% of manpower in those units have been lost too. They're all sent to die as cannon fodder because they had the gall to file a complaint about faulty manufacturing. Most of them are killed within days, very few survive even a week. And the military-industrial complex in response to this. Yeah, the Russian one. You'd think this would be their priority, apparently, because they are supposed to want to win this war, right? Well, it's actually even funnier. The manufacturers, in their infinite wisdom, explain it all away. They say that, quote, well, sometimes the shells are delivered unpainted just to save time. They say sometimes the explosive filler, which is made on one side of the country and then shipped to the other, doesn't have time to dry properly during the journey. But it's okay, they say, because it's still within the acceptable limits. And besides, the front needs shells now, and no one has extra time. Oh, but then the great ultimate excuse, which is just something that I believe to be the funniest thing personally. Quote, in Soviet times, shells were not fired in such quantities. They say if they tried to make everything perfectly now, the shells would never be ready. Amazeballs. Get that? The official line is that they can either make a lot of shells that don't work or a few shells that do. And those numbers that a lot of Western experts like to quote about how they're outdoing NATO, well, they're not trying to, do anything quality there. Those shells are really bad, and guess what? They also destroy the barrels of the guns, which they have massive issues with too. Glorious. This is the military-industrial complex of a supposedly global power, or at least pretending to LARP as one, admitting that there is a choice between quantity and basic functionality. Not even quality here. They are literally killing their own soldiers through negligence, and then those soldiers are executed by their own commanders for pointing it out. And nobody cares. Because this is just the norm. Because the Russian army is not even a war machine, it's a suicide pact. It's a system so obsessed with projecting strength that it has rolled from the inside out, turning its own arsenal into liability and its own soldiers into disposable assets. This isn't just incompetence. This is evil. And evil to such an extent that it's not even evil just against the Ukrainians. It is pure evil against their own people, and these people, well, they hate it utterly, fully. The ideological ones, that is. The rest of them, well, they're just there for money. As we find out, evil, as it turns out, is profoundly, hilariously stupid. Putin, you see, stands in front of a giant screen showing you cartoons of hypersonic missiles vaporizing aircraft carriers and speaking about Oreshnik or whatnot. But on the ground, his artillerymen are playing Russian roulette with their own ammunition, a gift from a military-industrial complex so corrupt and negligent it can't even produce functional tools for its fascist crusade. Alright, deep breaths now. Find the last clean patch of your soul and try to protect it. We've seen the state persecute its citizens, poison its soldiers, and arm them with junk. Well, now we enter the final state of this fascist state. It's not about just controlling the future, it's about retroactively editing the past. If you remember the story of two volunteers, Ernest and Goodwin, who were killed by their own side by a Colonel Puzik, before they died they recorded the video of their last words. The last words were basically about how this Puzik sells drugs and how these guys will be sent off to die. Amazingly good, because if you show initiative in that army and do not fall in line with the incompetence, then you get killed. In a world with any gravity, right? This video would be evidence, and Putin's Russia, the fact that you prove evidence somewhere out there, it's grounds for a lawsuit which will then get people sent to more meat assaults. The Colonel's associates are suing a blogger to have the video taken down, claiming the dying words of these men are damaging their business reputation out of all things. They're suing ghosts for libel. They're putting memory itself on trial. In a system built on single glorious lie, whole inconvenient truths, even those spoken by the dead, must be legally erased. I want you to picture the lawyers drafting this document, the sheer mental gymnastics, the moral acrobatics required to argue in a straight-faced manner that a dead man's last words are a form of corporate slander. Well, we've also seen their teachers and other people wear tinfoil hats on their heads, if you remember. And just when you think the story can't possibly get any more twisted, yeah, it does. The widow of Ernest, one of these dead guys, has been declared a wanted woman. The dead are defendants, and the grieving are fugitives. Amazing! This is the ultimate expression of a post-truth state. Reality is whatever the people with power say it is, and if you have a problem with that, then their lawyers will see you in court, even if they have thrown you out of an open window and you're already dead. Glorious. The state sues its own dead soldiers, poisons the living ones, harms them with junk, and hunts its own citizens with spreadsheets. That is the reality inside this glorious new empire. But what about the people they have liberated? What about the poor bastards in places like the Donbass who have been blessed with the arrival of the Russian world, right? Well, everyone who disagreed with it had left already. What remains there are those people who legitimately wanted Russia to come. So what glorious rewards do these guys get for being welcomed back into the warm, infernal, fraternal embrace of their supposed motherlands? Oh, these rewards are glorious. A masterclass in extortion and mob tactics. The reward's basically a thirst tax. Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR, a cancerous little acronym for a land that's been dying from a lack of water ever since its liberation began. The stage is set here, the population is desperate, and the new management has decided it's time to play games with their thirst. They currently don't have any water whatsoever. I have been posting videos and images of that stuff out on various social media. They get deliveries of water once every 3 days for 3 hours, and sometimes those 3 hours are in the middle of the night, and then they have to stand in nice little lines where they get brought water in huge cisterns, because although Russia claims that Ukraine has bombed the shit out of the pipes or just cut off their water, well, we have documented evidence that it was Russian-owned soldiers who just blasted it with FOBs, which is why no water can be delivered there. So they're all totally starving and being thirsty, to the point where we have multiple videos and evidence of old ladies just picking up, drinking water from bottles. What's worse is that they now use children for their propaganda, and these guys I feel sad for. Those guys who welcome Russia, I don't feel pity for. Now, imagine an 8-year-old boy having to beg for Putin to give him some water for the birthday, and we all know that is just not going to happen. Just amazing. But then, somehow, miraculously, throughout all of this, as you've also seen on Discord, it somehow got worse. Got even worse. First, there was the surprise. On July the 1st, the citizens of this DPR were delighted with new electricity tariffs. They had been promised a hike of 17%. Manageable, maybe. Painful, but what isn't in a war zone? But the state doesn't do manageable. Oh no, the Russian machine doesn't want to do these things. The bill came and the increase was not 17%. It was a whopping 43%. There were no loud announcements, no public discussions, no transparent explanations. What did you expect? This is Russia. The DPR tariff committee simply dropped this grenade into every household's budget and walked away. One day, your monthly bill for a standard 500 kilowatts is 1,360 rubles. The next, it's almost 2,000. And yeah, with their salaries being super low and prices being higher than Moscow, that's a big deal. The next, well, this one is not an indexation. That's a goddamn mugging by decree. They try to hide it, of course. They threw the plebs a bone by raising the preferential low-rate limit from 70 to 100 kilowatt-hours. A smokescreen, a puff of statistical noise to distract them from the fact that in practice, household costs have just skyrocketed. But what did you expect? That place is literally run by a person who used to hang out with Mavrodi in the biggest Soviet-era scam, and just the scam in the 90s, the MMM pyramid scheme. Glorious. And here comes the theater. The move is so brazen, so far beyond the national average of 11.9%, that even Russia's prosecutor general, a man named Igor Krasnov, had to pretend to be shocked. He publicly promised to check the legality of these extortionate tariffs. The cavalry's here. Moscow's pretending to be shocked. Shocked, I tell you. Shocked that its regional puppets are forcing the locals to be, fleeced and give away all their money by the same locals that they just saved. Now watch the ball closely. This is where the magic happens. The prosecutor is making noise. The people are pissed. The local authorities need a justification, and they need one fast. And then, on July 17th, it appeared. A miracle of convenient timing. The DPR media suddenly exploded with panic-stricken headlines. Acute water shortage could lead to shutdown of Zuyevskaya thermal power plant. The head of the Ministry of Energy himself, Denis Epifanov, announces with a straight face that this critical water situation threatens the stable operation of the very plant that provides a huge chunk of the region's electricity. A water crisis just in time, gloriously convenient. The local analysts like Yulia Skubayeva are calling bullshit on that. They're asking the right question. Could all this theatrical hysteria about a water shortage be a pre-planned smokescreen? A manufactured crisis designed to give the Donetsk authorities the perfect excuse for their 43% price gouge when the prosecutor from Moscow comes knocking? Well, the water crisis could be solved if they just actually cared about it. Electricity crisis on top of all of this stuff? Well, why not? It is a sign of Ukrainian drones working hard. But out of all the things, they physically could just provide water to them. If they would just use railroad for that instead of, bombs and weapons for trying to kill Ukrainian civilians, then maybe that would work. because Ukraine has stated multiple times that they had no plans or intent to cut off water from Donetsk. The Russians just bombed that thing. So if they try to bring in some water, then they could. Also, at the same time, the Russian rail network is complaining that they don't have enough cargo. Yeah, they could totally provide enough water. They just treat them as second-rate citizens anyway. Or just don't care. Callousness and everything. Once they need to go to battlefield and die or get AIDS, then these things matter. But otherwise, nah, it doesn't matter. So far, it looks like a perfect circle of extortion, even from these poor sods. I mean, the premiums for joining the army won't pay themselves. Step 1, jack up the prices illegally. Step 2, when the feds pretend to get angry, create a fake emergency that threatens the power supply. Step 3, argue that the price hike is an objective necessity to keep the lights on, which they won't be kept on anyways during the crisis you just invented, including all the war. Gangster governance 101, and of course they have pocketed everything that they can. And what do the authorities say to the people they rule over, supposedly? Well, nothing. Why would it? They're not responsible to them. They're just treating them as serfs. No explanations, no briefings, no nothing. Just dry decrees posted on the website and panic-mongering headlines fed to the media. They leave the people to draw their own conclusions, knowing that they are powerless to do anything about it. And these guys post on Telegram, and the people who care about that, yeah, then they go to jail. This is the Russian world in its purest form. This is the reward for your liberation. You are a resource to be squeezed. Your suffering is a lever to be pulled. Your thirst is a problem they can monetize. They take your water, then they sell you overpriced electricity, and then they use the lack of water as an excuse for the price of power. Congratulations on your liberation, Donbass! You have been freed from your old problems and blessed with a whole new set of glorious Russian-made ones. Now pay your bill, and be grateful that we are not sending you straight up to the front lines. Oh wait, the healthy males have literally ended there. Finally, they've run out of actual people to send from that area. And let's remember, over there, the Mr. Pushilin actually just even banned Starlink for his own forces. That's how far the stupid corruption goes. But let's return to the kid. The kid's name is Enes Hochagulari. Remember it. He's now arrested for, quote, publicly disseminating misleading information and inciting hatred and enmity. Legalistic sewage talk for he made us look bad. Stood up at Powder Wig Congress in Strasbourg on March 27th, and he had the goddamn nerve to speak. Title of his speech? Young people in Turkey say, enough. And what did he say? He talked about the cops cracking students' skulls. Talked about the space for dissent shrinking to the size of a coffin. He talked about them dragging away opposition mayors like Ekrem Imamoglu, the one man who the walking corpse in the presidential palace actually fears. On some, yet again, trumped-up corruption bullshit. You see, after they jailed Imamoglu, the youth of Turkey, the ones who haven't yet had their souls sucked out by Erdogan, or, skulls cracked in, they poured out into the streets. They organized, they screamed, they fought back, and state, in its infinite brutal wisdom, sent in the thugs. Beat them, gassed them, hauled about 2,000 of them off to jail. Widespread reports of police mistreatment and strip searches, which is just state-sanctioned rape, about extra steps. And this kid dared to talk about it on an international stage. As MP Sevda Karatsa put it, Enes voiced the anger of young people rising from the streets. Of course, the regime's ink-stained whores in the media and their troll armies on social media went after him immediately. They painted a large target on his back, and on Tuesday, the state pulled the trigger. Backlash was swift, for all the good it does. Opposition suit Murat Emir pointed out the obvious. The kid isn't a flight risk. He flew in. He came home knowing they were waiting. There's no evidence to collect. This isn't justice, it's just pure punishment and warning. And we've been talking about this stuff of Putin's side. Emir said that he was jailed to punish him in advance. They're trying to cope with fear by suppressing freedom of expression. They're not coping, I think. They're panicking. They're terrified of the young, terrified of anyone who remembers what a spine feels like. 14 LGBTQ organizations, people who know what the boot of the state feels like better than anyone, released a joint statement calling the arrest a threat to everyone. They defended his speech as a truthful reflection of the struggles faced by the young people in Turkey. A truthful reflection. That's the real crime, isn't it? In a world of liars, the truth is an act of war. Enes is a prisoner of that war. Another kid in a box for speaking. Another pound of flesh carved out by a paranoid, decaying power structure. They think this will silence people, but it might not silence the people. But this will make EU do their deep concern yet again, which has turned into a meme by now, which makes me so angry. And this, on an EU level, this will be totally tolerated because the EU has been lazy and neglected its armed forces, and for a long while, only us here in the Baltics and Poland and very few other countries had been paying their 2% of their national defense and trying to actually, protect our own tiny little countries. Right now, everyone's just crazily panicking. EU had been lazy, had neglected its armed forces, and now Enes is forced to pay for it, and we're forced to tolerate Erdogan. Alexandra Brzozowski wrote about this on 24th of May on Euraktiv, European news media. See, the wannabe Sultan in Ankara is busy tossing the last scraps of Turkish democracy into a furnace and nailing his main political rival to a cell door. And what are the brave knights of Europe doing? Even when kids get arrested, let me remind you the whole fuss that happened while Alexander Lukashenko did a very similar thing. Oh wait, he also landed the plane, which was flying over. I guess that was the bigger issue here. Out of all this effort of Erdogan, everyone's just sitting on their hands, pissing their tailored trousers, terrified of making the big man angry. They're looking the other way, so hard they're in danger of snapping their own necks. Let me translate this diplomatic bullshit of deep concern for you. Europe had to do the realpolitik once again, and the down payment was Turkish democracy. Turkey was on fire, as you see. The streets were filled with people screaming their lungs out because Erdogan, pure, uncut fascism, jailed this Istanbul mayor, and, well, protests happen. There should be something more than deep concern. But that was then. This is now. We live in the cursed timeline. You see, Daddy Trump's back in the White House, and he's made it crystal clear he couldn't give a rat's ass about Europe's security. So the EU, well, like a jilted lover, is desperately trying to find a new strongman to hold its hand. And who has the second biggest army in NATO and a booming arms industry? You guessed it, Turkey. And it'll take a while, and it will take a lot of effort and money to pull up Europe's own arms industry. And, the military-industrial complex in Germany will finally start functioning as it's supposed to. Or in Poland, Poland's buying stuff from Korea. And then we have France. Well, we have neglected things. We can't produce rockets for Patriot. We can't produce rockets for HIMARS. We can't produce a lot of things. So we need them. We really, really need them. The new Holy Grail in Brussels is a 150 billion euro war chest called SAFE, Security Action for Europe. They're opening the door to Turkey to just come in and do whatever for now and tolerate everything. And he can just be the bastard he's always been, but even more ruthlessly. He knows he has Brussels by the balls for now. He's got the army, he's got the drones, those Bayraktar things that everyone is dying to own. He controls the Bosphorus Strait, and he's always played his own side. He's backstabbed Putin multiple times, and he's always been playing his own game. And now he's winning. He's even got a standing offer to send his troops as peacekeepers to Ukraine. But don't mistake this for a partnership. This is blackmail. This is pure pragmatism. It's the same game he played with the refugee deal in Brussels, folded like a cheap suit then too. Now the new narrative oozing through the corridors of power is that Turkey is a like-minded partner. Same with Azerbaijan, whose oil we need, and all the other things that we can't do that should be right. What I hate the most is the hypocrisy. Can we at least admit that this is realpolitik instead of all these high-minded ideals? You mean EU is also a pack of cynical, power-hungry hypocrites willing to trade human lives for geopolitical leverage and cheaper drones, which we only need because we just, decided to, not invest in our security? Well, I have to correct stuff here. Not we. We in the Baltics, we were always concerned about the situation, but then the West called us paranoid. Now, well, activists like this kid will have to pay for my own safety, and I feel bad about this. I feel fucking horrible. I guess big politics makes everyone kindred fucking spirits. You can't really hope that anyone out there would be truly an idealistic person, but then everyone's gonna yell at not keeping up with Western ideals. What are our ideals at the moment? If we're doing this shit, then at least we could be honest about it. It's gotten to the point where even India is now lashing out at the United States and the EU criticizing our double standards over trade relations with Russia after Trump threatened to do tariffs on Indian goods and secondary sanctions if they would continue to import Russian oil. India's Ministry of External Affairs said in a statement, quote, "The countries criticizing India are themselves engaged in trade with Russia," adding that it's unjustified to target India alone. They noted that the EU conducted trade with Russia worth 67.5 billion euros. That is, in 2024, including record liquefied natural gas imports of 16.5 million metric tons. And we do it because indecisiveness and deep concern. At least, it seems that we're moving in somewhat right direction, but we as the voters in Europe, we should take a hard look at ourselves. I mean, my generation and younger people and everyone really. With the security situation, yeah, it is what it is, of course. But for how long can we actually claim to have some sort of morality, or what is this? Is this the European values? This is why we need that military-industrial complex, so that we would have our own spine. Europe will always be this. We like to say that we're powerful and mighty, and we are if we try to, if we're united. We should be able to stand above this situation. Sure, pragmatism has its own place, but this is what I hate the most. We must get used to this. And including the whole internet security laws and censorship that's about to happen, that's already happening in UK, and that's planned in EU as well. That scares me, because we're moving away from democracy here. I remember how Dan Carlin protested and spoke about how the United States got turned into a surveillance state after 9/11, and I wouldn't want us to lose our own freedoms and everything. We're trading them and we're being very harsh and pragmatic, and we should remember this, and maybe someday someone else will come up and speak that, realpolitik has its place, but at least be fair and honest about it, because if you're smiling and waving and pretending that everything's fine, maybe these are the European values, and that hurts me a lot. So, protesters, those guys in Istanbul and Ankara, sorry dudes, you're on your own. Welcome to the new pragmatic Europe. It looks like a lot of the old gutless one, just with better weapons. Enes Hochagulari, I hope I pronounce his name, paid for them, with freedom and everything, and it pisses me off so much. We have to remain vigilant, and we have to remember this when things get a bit better. Because this also is not the Europe that I would like to live in, that just allows this. Because Erdogan wouldn't be doing this if there wouldn't be a tacit approval of all this nonsense. So there you have it. Russia's glorious fucking crusade and all this stupid mess. Russia is waging this holy war by a state that uses algorithms to hunt its own people for thought crimes. Europe is now, expressing deep concern and getting weapons from Turkey that's doing similar issues, and we have our internet law looming. Russia isn't a mighty empire reborn, it's a rotting edifice, a paranoid incompetence, a real machine collapsing under the weight of its own monstrous lies. Because the fascism isn't the source of its strength, it's the source of its decay. But we have to be careful. We have to be careful to not allow this happen to ourselves. Because if we're not honest about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and if we would just keep silent and not talk about these issues and why this is happening and why this deep concern and why not much else is going to happen, this might go on. And at the same time, they're going to scream something about internet security and pretend that it's going to be great for everyone, and then you're going to have to, just like in UK, present your ID to listen to Spotify. Where are the values then? Enes, he's a great guy. We should not forget it. But we should remember that the truth is out there. And what we're doing now, we should admit that we are doing this because of necessity. We need those weapons. And if the EU doesn't remilitarize normally, if Germany's program turns out to be wasted, and if we just don't focus and get our security in order so that we don't have to do this shit in the future anymore, well, then I'll get to real screaming. If we're doing this just to put some money in some politicians' pockets, then I'll have to write even more scathing texts, sadly. Right now, at least I can understand and hate, because realpolitik is what it is. But at least don't be Russia. Don't lie to yourself, because that's how the system breaks down, and that's how you start going down a horrible, horrible dark path. Think about it, and make sure that there is some truth your words, dear Euro-Parliament politicians. Because otherwise, how better are we, after all, than Erdogan put it? That's it for today, comrades. До свидания, товарищи. And remember, happiness is mandatory. And just because I hate Putin and Erdogan doesn't mean I won't be honest about the stupid stuff the EU does. Because that is just not just and does not stand for my personal values.
Thank you for listening to the Eastern Border Show. If you have any questions or comments, go to our website, theeasternborder.lv, and leave a comment there. Or email us at theeasternborder@gmail.com. We'll be sure to answer. You can also follow us on social media and contact us there. If you enjoyed this episode, then leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about us. It really helps us grow the show. And remember, happiness is mandatory.